Hello, Katie, and hi, everybody in the room. For those of you that don't know me, I am Simona Haji Georgalis, and with us today, we have a registered dietitian and wellness coach, Laura Nagy, to talk to us as we go into the lead up to our 6-week challenge that begins this coming Monday. So with that, I would like to pass the mic over to Laura. Laura, thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to hearing you.
Awesome. My pleasure. Well, thanks for having me, Katie. This is an exciting opportunity for me to get to come and speak about something that I am very passionate about, which is well-being. And I understand that all of you are getting to launch out into your own wellness program here for the next 6 weeks or so. And that is so exciting to me because you're going to be feeling amazing as you take these steps towards your holistic wellness. So today we're going to launch you off with nutrition. And as Simona said, I'm a registered dietitian and a certified wellness coach. I just got my certification last year for that. And that is really my area of interest, to go with people to a deeper level with their well-being and help you get where you want to be. So today we're going to be talking about nutrition, but I encourage you to think of that in the framework of your whole life and just where you want to go with your holistic wellness. So we're going to keep it high level today, just going over the basics of healthy eating. And my goal is to send you off with a real feeling of empowerment that you can make some changes with your nutrition, with your healthy eating, small things, nothing too overwhelming, but that you can take action. And it doesn't have to be quite as overwhelming as we sometimes feel. We get a lot of information around healthy eating and nutrition from the media, from websites, wherever you are. It's a lot of conflicting stuff. And so I'm bringing it down to just the very basic level today. Simplifying things, balanced eating at its most simple, hopefully, for you. But if you have questions, please jump in with those. We can go a little deeper into areas you're interested in. And I like to keep it very informal, so throw out your questions if you've got them, and we'll deal with them in the moment, or save them for the end, whichever you prefer. So let's launch in. Here's what we're talking about today. This is what's on the menu. We've got a few things. First of all, recommendations for balanced eating. And here's where I want to just give you an overview, a picture of what it looks like to eat healthfully in a simple way you can do at home, on the go, at a restaurant, wherever you are. So we're going to make it very simple. Recommendations for balanced eating. Then mindfulness, and this is where it gets really exciting. As you think about being more mindful with your health and more mindful with your nutrition, being aware of what you're doing. And this is kind of a key to maintaining the new habits you're going to put in place. So that'll be exciting to talk about. Also, fueling a new fitness routine. And I know with this awesome program you have going on here, fitness is part of that. So as you're starting maybe your first fitness routine, or maybe you're a long-time athlete, you've done this for forever, these are some just general things to keep in mind as you're starting out or continuing your fitness. And then practical strategies, healthy eating made simple. And you're going to hear that word simple a lot today, just because I want all of you to leave with the feeling you can do this. So there are a lot of ways we can tailor a nutrition program for your needs. We have a lot of challenges in this day and age with our time constraints, money constraints, whatever it might be. So we want to kind of go to those areas a little bit and address some common challenges we have to hopefully make it easier. So, and then we'll end with your next step. So yes, there's homework. You got to do something with this information. So hopefully we'll make it easy and fun. So let's launch in. First of all, I always want to start with a foundation of why. Why do we want to eat healthy at all? What's the point? What's the reason for it? And you'll see here a lot of sort of bigger reasons why we need to eat healthfully. Number one, we need nutrients to live, to function. Our bodies can't live without them. We can't get up and move without energy intake. So it's a very basic need that we have. We need to eat every day. And what we put in our bodies is going to affect how we can then use our bodies. So just a daily turnover of body materials at every given moment while you're sitting here in your chair, your body is making new materials for your life. Cell turnover, you're making new cells. You're building hormones. Your hair is growing. Your muscles maybe are growing or rebuilding after a workout. So you need your nutrition to focus on that every day. Really important. Healing, brain function, hormone production, all of these are sort of generalized reasons why what we eat is important. It's affecting day-to-day processes. Supporting a healthy body weight, and we know, all of you I'm sure are aware, obesity is going up. We know it's a problem, and what we eat has a direct effect on that, of course. So when you're eating a more healthful, balanced diet, you're able to maintain a healthy body weight for you. And that might seem like, oh, well, who really cares about that? We know obesity has some major impact on chronic disease overall, and obesity is in itself a chronic disease. So we want to avoid that if possible, of course. Phytochemicals is another reason why we want to eat healthfully. And you might be saying, what on earth are phytochemicals? We'll address that more later. But they are a very specialized component of healthful whole plant foods that have benefits that are beyond vitamins and minerals. So you've all probably heard we need vitamins and minerals. This is an extra thing. That's a new area of research that's really cool. So we're going to get into that a little bit too. So there are a lot of reasons, overarching reasons, why what we eat is important. And let's bring it down a little bit more for you. What are your whys? Why did you even start this wellness program? Anyone want to throw out to the group? Why did you want to start in this? What was enticing about this wellness program? Anybody? Why do you care about your well-being? Someone. Yeah. Yeah, so wanting to make some changes so you can sort of go from where you are to an even healthier place. Absolutely. Anyone else? Reasons why you care about your well-being. I can share one of mine. I love adventure stuff. So climbing mountains, all that kind of thing. I want to be able to do that. And so what I eat and my wellness affects my ability to do the activities I love. Anyone else? Your why? Think about that while we go into this. There are, again, many reasons. The chronic disease prevention piece, I'm not going to dwell long there because we can all see, hopefully recognize, that is an issue in this day and age. Chronic disease is rising, and it does have a cost. So not to be a downer, but we have to remember that the things we do now for our well-being will affect our life down the road. It's a little hard to think in that mindset sometimes because we're just caught up in the now. But just to be aware, what you lay in place now with your foundational wellness will benefit you down the road as well. So keep that in mind. Some other things, increased energy every day. Who likes to feel energetic? I know I do. So when we eat healthfully, that helps support our energy throughout the day. And we'll talk about that as well as we get into more the basics of healthy eating to match your energy intake with your output. So if you have a really taxing thing you're doing, even if it's just a stressful work job that you're doing, you need to fuel that. So we'll deal with that as well. So some basic benefits, the ability to do the things you want to do. I kind of mentioned that's one of my whys, just because I like to be active. I want to keep being active. So that's a reason. Longevity, people who eat healthier, who put in place fitness in their lives, they actually do live longer. So most of us would kind of enjoy that. So keep that in mind. Lots of really important benefits for you as you take these steps for your well-being. So think about your why as we continue on with this. So nutrition, like I mentioned in the beginning, we've got lots of mixed messages on this. There have been a lot of changing messages with nutrition. A while ago, we heard fat was terrible. Now we find out fat is good for us, but it depends on the kind. Then we hear carbohydrates are evil. No carbs, ever. And now we know that's not the case either. So there's a lot of changing stuff. I could go to each of those areas and try to give you evidence or reasons why that's no longer true. We're just going to go back to the basics of what we do know to be true. So there's a lot of new evidence that comes through every day, a lot of stuff that Simona and I were talking earlier about this, just that studies aren't covering some areas that we know, some things we know are healthful, studies just aren't speaking to them. So there's a lot of research and a lot of holes where we need more research, but we're going to the basics today. So just keep that in mind. So what we do know right now, what we know for sure, whole foods. Whole foods is where it's at. We want whole foods. Fresh foods, foods that you can recognize, that you know what they are. Foods where when you're reading the ingredients, you actually understand what those words mean, where you can see it on your plate and you know what it is. So whole foods, colorful foods, as minimally processed as possible. So that's sort of the basic message here. Plant-based when possible. And I'm not going to hammer you over the head that everyone in here needs to become a vegetarian. I don't think that's the case. But we do know that plants contain a lot of healthful nutrients. So when we emphasize those as the main portion of our meal, we get more nutrients, which means we get more energy, which means we live longer, we function better. So a good reason why plant-based foods are better for you options. So keep that in mind. Moderate portion sizes, we know portion sizes are increasing. We'll talk about that later. But bringing it back to what does your body need? How much do you need to eat? Not how much the restaurant gave you on your plate, but how much do you actually need for your life, to keep your weight stable, to keep your energy where it should be. So you're not eating too little, but you're also not eating too much. So that's what we know for sure. Whole foods, plant-based when possible, and then match your portions to what you really need. It's as simple as that. But we'll go into a little more depth. So where do we start? This kind of reiterates what I already said, but I really want to point out specifically making small changes. And again, we could just dump on you all the things you need to do to get your eating perfect. That's not what I want you to take away today. Just take away a couple things that speak to you of a way you could kind of move your eating closer to where you want it to go. So small changes, those are the ones that are sustainable. So make those. The bottom line is you're doing this because you are worth it and because you will feel better when you do it. So there's a huge reason why mixed into all of that. Yeah.
The way we celebrate success is also additive to our choices.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned that. We'll speak to that a little bit later too. But definitely celebrate all of the things you're doing well now in a non-food related manner, and then move towards some of those other successes. Okay, so the balanced eating bottom line basics message is really reflected by this plate here. And this might seem pretty simplistic, and there's a lot more we could say about each of these components that I'm not going to go into today. But in basic, half our plate we want to be fruits and veggies, a lot of them raw, ideally. That's always good. A quarter of our plate, whole grains, and also starches kind of counts in here. So whole grains, we'll go into what each of these components is, but quarter of your plate is going to be whole grains or starches. And then a quarter of your plate, healthy proteins, lean protein options. And again, we'll go into what that means later. But if you reflect this on your meals every day, most of the time, even when you're eating out, you'll be getting pretty much the portions you need without overdoing. And you'll be getting all the nutrients that you need as well, especially if you can incorporate some variety in there. So you're not always eating the same things on your plate. So that in a nutshell is what we're talking about. So I want to get you guys involved with this. We'll go into whole grains first. Throw out some whole grains to me. Anyone know of any? Brown rice, very good. What else? Quinoa, awesome. What else? Whole grains. Whole wheat flour, absolutely. Another thing we often find people eating for breakfast. Oatmeal, yeah. Some others, barley is one of them. Couscous can be a whole grain, so you may have heard of that one. A lot of different grains out there. And here's what we mean when we say whole grain. And you may have heard that before, we need to have whole grains. What does that mean? Well, it just means that the whole grain contains the bran portion, the outer husk on that kernel. And in the outer husk is where we find the B vitamins for energy, lots of fiber, and some other phytochemicals in there, some other of those non-vitamins, non-minerals, just really health-promoting components. So they're all in that outer portion of the grain. When they process or refine the grain, they strip all of that away, and we lose it. That's why it's usually whiter in color when we're having a refined grain. And then later on, they kind of throw some nutrients back in, and they'll say it's fortified, and that's what our refined grains are. We're missing a lot when we eat refined grains. We want the whole grain because it has those extra vitamins that are naturally occurring in the food, and it has all the fiber, which has many benefits for us. Here's some here. Heart health, it keeps the amount of fat in our blood down when we have a lot of fiber. Weight balance, you can feel fuller actually when you have a high fiber meal. It helps everything in your GI tract, your gastrointestinal tract, helps it all function as it should. So it's really, really important. So the refined grains, they give us energy in the form of calories, but they don't give us all those other things. And because they're a simpler sugar, they don't have the fiber, they can drive your blood sugar up much faster, which gives you kind of a spike in energy, and you'll feel really energetic for a minute, and then it'll crash. So over the course of time, they're not as healthful for us. So you miss a lot with refined grains. So when we talk about that quarter of your plate being whole grains or starches, we want them to be whole grains because they're just better for you. That's why. So how do you know if your food is whole grain? Look at the ingredients. If it says whole grain such and such as one of the first ingredients, then you'll know it's primarily a whole grain food. If you look on the ingredient label as well and see that the fiber is nice and high, that's sometimes a clue as well that it's a whole grain, but you should see that in the ingredient list. Any questions about whole grains before we move on? Awesome. So you want quarter of your plate whole grains. Moving on. Half your plate fruits and veggies. So for this one, there is so much I could say about fruits and veggies. And you've probably heard it your whole life that you need to eat them. But we really do, because they have so many benefits for us. Dense source of nutrients. Dense source, especially when they're brightly colored. So those nice, deep, rich purples, blues, greens, reds, they clue us in that there are a lot of nutrients in that food. So a huge benefit with very little detriment to the body because they're lower in calories. They have lots of fiber. They have lots of water in them as well. So basically, they're a beautiful package, lots of flavor in them too. Beautiful package, lots of good things in there, and very little bad stuff, very little harmful stuff for us. So we want to emphasize them, which is why they are a half of our plate. So with this one, leaving it up to you how you want to fill that. Do you want it to be mostly raw fruits and veggies, some of them cooked? The first step is just get to that half of your plate being fruits and veggies. That's step number one, and then we can go further with that. So they're prepackaged as a healthy fast food. If you think of an apple or an orange, you can just pick it up and go. So it helps with our inconvenience challenges that we sometimes have. We don't have a lot of time, but you can just reach for that and grab it and go. So another good reason to choose them. Learning to prepare them in ways you enjoy. We can go into this more, especially if you have specific questions around that. I recognize veggies are not always everyone's favorite. They just aren't. But they can become much more delicious as you learn how to make them in ways you enjoy. Any questions on fruits and veggies? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great question. Yeah, so she asked about the sugar content of fruits and if we need to limit the portion. For this question, I would want to know more about who are you as an individual. If there's any issues with blood sugar, we will be more careful with the fruit because, yes, it does have a higher sugar content. For the average individual, when you look again at that package that the sugar's coming in, it's a much more complex sugar. It comes with a lot of fiber and a lot of water and a lot of nutrients. So for the average person, healthy body, you would have to stuff yourself on fruits for it to be a problem. For most of us, we don't really need to worry about portions quite so much. Again, be mindful of your energy intake versus your output. So if you're just going to be sitting around all day, maybe not the best choice to stuff yourself with anything. Keep it moderate in portion size. But keeping them to around that quarter of your plate kind of thing, that'll keep your portions in check. But again, if there's a blood sugar issue, then we would be more mindful of those. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Awesome question. Thanks for asking. So again, coming back to the package, when you have fruit juice, they took away all the fiber. It's just water and sugar in that fruit juice. So you're giving yourself basically a shot in the arm of sugar water with some nutrients, yes. So it can fit into a healthy diet, but you want to keep it very, very small, or ideally just don't worry about the fruit juice. Have the real fruit. It's better to eat the whole orange than orange juice. But a small amount can fit with a healthy diet. Yeah. It's a little different if you're making juice from scratch, especially if it's the kind where it just pulverizes the fruit. Then you keep a lot more of the fiber. But if you are just doing the regular juicing, yes, you are removing a lot of fiber. Any other questions? Yeah.
So in your plate graphic,
yes.
Like potatoes don't count. Are there other fruits and veggies that you should avoid?
Potatoes can fit in a healthy diet. They're just going to fit into the carbohydrate starch category. So that quarter of your plate, that's where the potatoes will go. And they actually have a lot of nutrients in them. Potatoes have some fiber, lots of nutrients, so they do fit. Just keep them to that quarter. Even though they're technically a vegetable, we're going to keep them in the starch category. Does that answer your question?
Are there others?
again, when we're talking about carbohydrates and starches, we're always going to limit them to the quarter of the plate. So in that respect, we do limit the portion size. For regular fruits fitting into this half of the plate thing, again, you'd have to stuff yourself. Most people are not going to get to that point. But again, think of just mindfulness, bring mindfulness into it. How much do I really need to eat to be full and satisfied here? If you're just eating to when you're just full, then you'll be okay with the portion size for the average person. Does that answer your question? It's a complicated thing because every lifestyle is different. So what works for one person is not appropriate for another. So you have to look at kind of your own picture. Yeah.
Can you talk about the myth or potentially not myth of cooking the nutrients out of vegetables when you cook them?
Yes. So some nutrients, we have fat-soluble vitamins and we have water-soluble vitamins. If you are looking at the water-soluble vitamins and you steam or boil a vegetable for a long period of time, you're going to lose some of those nutrients in the cooking water. So a way to keep those nutrients in your body is just to put that cooking water into a soup, have it later in the day, something like that. You'll preserve those nutrients. If you just take the vegetable out and dump the water, then you're losing some of the nutrients. You're keeping some of the fiber, you're keeping some of the nutrients, but you're losing a lot in that cooking water. So that's why we recommend cooking your vegetables, brief steaming, roast them a little bit. We don't have to worry about it so much with the fat-soluble vitamins. It's really the water-soluble ones. Thanks for that. Any other questions on fruits and veggies? Awesome. Well, let's move forward. So protein. Protein we hear a lot about, especially in the fitness community. People thinking they need to just kind of eat as much protein as they possibly can so that their muscles just grow. And that's not quite how it works. We don't need unlimited protein. We just need about a quarter of the plate size. And with this one as well, you can, if you're a vegetarian, you can find ample sources of protein to support your physical activity, support your well-being. If you're not a vegetarian, you can certainly find ample sources of it that way too. So either way works. When we're thinking of quarter of the plate, we're looking for a lean source of protein. And that just means we're looking for one that has as little of the harmful fats as possible. So a leaner cut of beef, chicken without the skin, those kind of things to look for a more lean source. Or a plant-based source, such as tofu or tempeh or soy products or let's see what else. Beans are another good source. Nuts are another good source. So there are lots of different ways to get your protein. We just want to look at keeping it on the leaner side, if possible. We need protein for everything in the body, really. It's what we're made of. The body uses all the different structural parts of proteins to rebuild structures in the body. So that's why we need to take it in on a regular basis. Especially if you're physically active, you'll need to be sure you're getting adequate protein. But if your calories are adequate and you're eating a wide variety of foods, there's not as much a need to worry about counting grams of protein. You'll be fine if you're eating the right amount of calories for you. So keep that in mind. I do want to mention here that when we're talking about animal sources of protein, we really do want to choose hormone-free animal products, as well as ideally grass-fed beef is the best choice. And that just means that they are allowed to be cows in the world, and they are taking in the food that they're meant to eat rather than sort of man-made products that then affect the quality of that meat. So I do encourage you, choose organic when you can, choose grass-fed whenever possible, while recognizing that can be an additional cost. But again, the effort you put into your health now does reap rewards later. So just keep that in mind. Where is your money going? What are you investing in? In this case, you're investing in you. So keep that in the forefront of your mind. Healthy fats. So this one's a fun one because it gets a lot of before I go there, any questions on protein? Yeah.
What's the difference between protein powder and, say, an animal protein? You know how you make
Yes.
protein powder?
Mm-hmm. You can get the same amino acids, which is what a protein is made of. But again, looking at that package of the food, oftentimes a protein powder has a lot of flavorings added into it, a lot of sugar so that it tastes decent. And what you're really doing is you're kind of having like a milkshake, an ice cream milkshake with extra protein in it. So protein powder, you can find good ones. I'm not saying all protein powders are bad, but again, you'll look at the ingredients on there, look at the sugar content in particular, and just recognize that when you're eating a whole food, more of an unprocessed food, sometimes you're getting a lot of benefit without all of that added stuff. So protein powder contains amino acids just like a piece of meat does, but it can sometimes have extra stuff thrown in that we don't really need. Does that make sense? Yeah.
What about it in terms of, especially she's speaking about chicken or fish or beef, whey protein is a byproduct of cheese. So it's a dairy-based protein.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some differences there. So people can't do
Yeah.
dairy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are some good ones like that. And again, if you look at the particular brand and the company and what their philosophy is, you can find some good ones out there. Some people love the Arbonne products that are supposed to be more clean, more natural. Again, always look at your ingredients. Always look at the label and read what's in there. There are good ones. It can also be an expense as well. So you kind of have the convenience of a good protein powder versus the expense of a protein powder when you could just eat a fish or chicken or something like that. So again, it's what your needs are. If time is a real factor for you, then maybe a really good high quality protein powder would be helpful. So you have to look at the whole person. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they, yes, yeah. And they do different things. The whey protein versus casein versus all these other things, they are released differently in the body. So if you're a bodybuilder, you might choose a certain kind because it's going to release that protein when your body needs it. So there's a whole sort of other way of thinking about it if you are using it for physical activity. Yeah. Correct. Correct. Yep. You can absolutely get all that you need through whole food. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So cheese is a very high-fat source of protein. So again, we're emphasizing lean proteins. It doesn't mean you can't have cheese. Cheese has a lot of protein in it. So it is technically a protein food. But the amount of harmful fat for the body is so great that it's important to keep that in mind just as you're incorporating into your diet. So again, more recent studies have been done by people to look at how cheese affects the brain. And so there's some research out there that suggests it can be very inflammatory. Yes. Yes. Yes, it releases those same neurotransmitters like an opiate would. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so that's another thing to keep in mind. The evidence would seem to suggest it's inflammatory. So we know inflammation's a problem in this day and age, especially given our stress levels. It just drives it right up. So if you want to kind of take the next step for your health and try removing it for a while, just see how you feel. You might notice a difference with that. So yes, it has protein. It's also inflammatory. So kind of weigh that in the balance as you're thinking about it. Any other questions on proteins? Yeah. Yes. The hyper-processed soy is the kind that we kind of want to limit. And again, like all processed foods, it has issues. If you're having edamame or tofu or something like that, we don't see the harmful effects with those. So the estrogen mimicking properties. So avoid processed foods of any kind. And that's really the message here. Avoid them when possible. Choose the whole food. Any other questions on proteins? Okay. So fats. And I don't even know what our time is here. Want to be mindful of that. So we'll go through this kind of quickly. Good fats versus bad fats. So there's no question, fat has a lot of calories in it. And that can be part of why it gets a bad rap sometimes. If I eat high-fat foods, I'm going to get fat. Not really the case, but we do have to recognize fat holds a lot of energy in it. It's a very dense source. So we don't ever need to overdo with fat. We'll just be overdoing calories. We want moderate amounts of fat, but it's important for the diet. So the good kind of fat is the unsaturated fat. So we're looking at olive oil, that kind of thing. In avocados, in nuts, we have a lot of unsaturated fat. That's the kind that is quote unquote heart healthy. So it can support your heart health. Again, if it's overused, it's going to give you too many calories. It is going to cause you to gain weight, and that's not helpful for your heart. So again, moderation, but it is heart healthy. You'll find this in fish, nuts, avocados, olive oil, all of that kind of thing. The fat to avoid, trans fat and saturated, especially trans fat. So with trans fats, they basically take the molecule and they add a whole lot of hydrogens on it, and that just makes it very stable. So it can sit there and it won't degrade with time. So they put them into processed foods because they're going to be on the shelf for a long time. They need it to be stable. But what we find is this sort of twisted version of a fat is very damaging to the heart. So keep those 0. Look on your packages, make sure 0 grams trans fat. Saturated fat's a little different. We do need it. Our bodies need it to survive. We need it for our cell membranes, but we already make it. So we don't really need to worry about eating enough for health. We already have enough. So keeping that to a limited portion is a good idea. So that's why we want to avoid excessive sources of saturated fat, which are in a lot of processed foods as well. So avoiding those. A good rule of thumb is to look at the fats that are solid at room temperature, and this isn't true for all fats, but it's a rule of thumb. Solid fats at room temperature are typically higher in saturated fat, and so we want to kind of keep them on the lower side. The liquid fats like olive oil, flaxseed oil, typically better for us. They have more of the unsaturated fat, so we're going to emphasize those as our sources. Does that make sense? Coconut oil, I'm glad you mentioned that. Coconut oil is a very trendy topic right now. And this is one where in the evidence that we have through a lot of our organizations, there aren't a lot of studies done about coconut oil, but we do know from other sources that coconut oil is very rich in medium and short chain fatty acids, which the body processes differently than it does regular saturated fat. So coconut oil is technically a saturated fat, but it doesn't work in the body the same way as the other saturated fats like lard or something like that. So again, in moderation, it's a good thing. Any other questions on fats? And the same would be true of something like ghee, which is a clarified butter. Again, it's that same thing. Short chain fatty acids, the body uses them differently. Any other questions on fat? Cool. Moving on. So balanced eating, I'm not going to read through each one of these because I want to get onto the mindfulness piece. But just a couple things to keep in mind as you're thinking of the overall picture of your life. Just remember to fuel often, eat every 3 hours or so. Start your nutrition early in the day if you can. Fuel that fire early or on. Don't let yourself get so over hungry that then you overdo later. Keep that in mind. And then choose the foods you eat with mindfulness. And that's what we're going to go into next. So mindfulness in our last little bit of time here. I'll breeze through this a little bit so we can get to questions. What is the point of mindfulness? Really at the heart of the matter, mindfulness is just bringing your awareness into what you're doing with yourself all day, every day. Being aware of the choices you make. Being aware of, am I hungry? Should I eat something now? Or am I full and I should stop? Bringing that into the mix allows you to honor your body, listen to what your body tells you, rather than using external cues. And this is a real problem that we find in today's society, is that we're given a lot of external cues around what to eat, how much, how often, and it's becoming harder and harder to listen to our own internal signals. We're born with them. If you watch a little child, you can give them a plate of cupcakes, and they'll eat one or however much they want, and then they'll be able to walk away from it, and they won't eat anymore. We kind of tune those voices out over time. Some of you may have grown up with parents who told you to always clean your plate, and you kind of override that internal signal of, I'm full, and you just learn to, you're not finished eating until the plate is empty. So external cues become more important. We want to bring it back to what makes you feel the best. What does your body tell you? Are you hungry? Are you full? Listening to that. So again, this reiterates kind of what I said, and I point out this Ansel Keys study. We won't go into it in depth today, but it was a study they did during World War II, and they learned that they had a group of men who they basically deprived them of calories for a long time, a very restricted calorie amount. And they learned that these people who were not eating in what their body told them to eat, they became obsessed with food, they had mood changes, their metabolic rate went down, a lot of unnatural changes with deprivation, basically, of food. So that's just, I'm using that as an illustration of, if we don't allow our bodies to tell us what we eat so that we're eating what we need, we can experience a lot of negative changes over time. So mindfulness, really important so that you're able to fuel yourself in the way that your body requires. I'm going to skip over this today because we're running out of time. But basically, all this to illustrate that our external cues can sometimes dictate what we do. Our eyes can deceive us. These are just two little optical illusions here to just emphasize that we can see a plate that's full of food and think that that's how much our body needs to eat when it doesn't really. So we want to take it internal. I do want to speak to this for a moment, just honoring your hunger and feeling your fullness and recognizing that, again, those internal signals are sometimes clouded by what's going on with our emotions or our environment. So in this moment, you can even close your eyes if you want to. Just try to really just be in the moment for a second and notice on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not really hungry at all and 10 is ravenously hungry, where are you right now? Do you even know? Do you recognize hunger and fullness in your own body? Or has it gotten clouded over by things? So just, you can use that technique before you eat a meal even. Check in with yourself. Where am I right now? What's my hunger and fullness level? How much do I then need to eat? And be aware also, is this actual physiological hunger? I'm actually hungry. My body needs fuel. Or is it maybe an emotion that's making me just want to reach for something? I know I have been very guilty of emotional eating in the past. It's easy to do. Some key emotions that sometimes trigger this are anger, tiredness, boredom, loneliness. Or on the other side, special occasions, that feeling of, oh, everything's great, nothing matters, I'm just going to eat as much as I want. So a lot of different emotions can trigger emotional eating for us. Stress eating, you may have experienced before. So I encourage you, just as we think of this mindfulness piece, to bring that into your own life and start to practice that on a daily basis. To just check in with yourself, am I hungry? Okay, I'll eat something. Am I just emotionally hungry? Is that what it is? Maybe I need to redirect and do something else. So check in with yourself on a regular basis. Some practical steps for you, which you can just read them yourselves right now. One I want to point out is to allow yourself to be present with your meal. So when you're going to sit down and eat something, and this is so hard in the corporate environment, especially we're on the go all the time, allow yourself to actually eat when you eat. Sit there, notice what you're eating, notice how it tastes. What does it even look like? What textures do you notice? What colors? What flavors? What smells? Be aware of that. That adds to your experience of eating and allows your body to actually have a moment to process that you're eating at all. So it can help you just, again, match your intake to what you need, notice your internal signals, and honor those. Any questions on mindfulness or mindful eating? Is anyone already doing this? Maybe. Awesome. You are. Very good. Any strategies for us that you'd like to give the group?
One small thing and conquer that first. Take small steps.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try and do it all at once.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. And don't think of it as a diet. It's not. You need to change it forever.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thanks for that. Yeah. Small things. Bring your awareness to small things. So the bottom line here with mindfulness, listening to your body and learning to hear what it tells you. So we'll go through this real quick. I think we still have a little bit of time. Are we wrapping up?
I know. I just want to, those on the line, and some of you might have to leave. So
Yeah, sure.
for those of you that can stick around, I know that Laura has graciously offered to stay for the next 30 minutes after our conversation. So if anybody has any questions, personal questions, you can ask her then, or you can do it in a Q&A environment. You're welcome to stick around as she continues the presentation, but I know some people have a 4 o'clock meeting that you're going to have to head off to. So why don't we have you continue? But first, let's just thank you all of us because it's just been, thank you so much. So if you want to continue, but if you have to duck out, you'll be able to check out the recording. And if you do want to stay and ask her questions afterwards, when you finish your presentation, we'll cut the stream and have Q&A. Thank you so very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'll just continue on and then interrupt me if you have questions. But I did want to speak to nutrition and physical activity since some of you will hopefully be launching into your own physical activity program. Just a couple tips for you. There is no one right way of fueling a physical activity program. There just isn't. We're all different. Our bodies are different. Our needs are different. The only thing I want you to walk away with this is the importance of fueling yourself. to not skimp on your energy needs when you're launching out into a new program, to allow yourself to refuel. So try to eat something before and after your workout. If it's a very short workout, you may not need to really do much different in your life. Maybe just make sure you had a snack mid-morning if you're going to work out around lunchtime. Be aware of fueling yourself when you're hungry, listening to those body signals. Learn how your body responds. So you might find some people love a peanut butter and jelly sandwich right before they go run a marathon or something. Other people, that does not work for them. So start to learn for you what works best for you. Typically, we want a mix of carbohydrates and proteins. So just make sure you have that. Hydrate, and you will probably be fine. Listening to your body the whole time. Some snack ideas on here, just ideas for how to refuel post-workout, pre-workout. Again, we're noticing whole foods here. And then these go into the challenges for healthy eating. And instead of reading all these to you, this is the end of the presentation here. If any of you have challenges that you'd like me to speak to, and we can kind of brainstorm, throw those out there. If not, I encourage you all to just take a moment and think about, what would you like to take away from this? What resonated with you? Maybe you already knew all of this, and that's great. If you didn't, and there's something that you'd like to kind of take to the next level, just kind of note that. You can even use your handout, jot it down. It's a good idea to write notes for yourself. And remember, the whole reason behind this is just because you will feel different when you're honoring your health and doing what you need for your body. So I encourage you to make a few small changes and continue them. Be consistent, and you will feel the difference. So that wraps everything up. Any questions on anything at all? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, those are the veggies that are cleaner. So when we're talking about organic, we're really looking at pesticides and that kind of thing. If you're going to be peeling off that outer layer, you significantly reduce the amount of pesticides you're taking in. So some people want as little as they possibly can, and they would still buy those organic just because they want the minimum. If you're just trying to find a middle ground and you're trying to save a little money, because it is sometimes expensive to buy organic, then absolutely choose organic produce if you're going to eat that skin. And then you can choose the conventional for other things if you need to. But another way to save money on that is to actually purchase frozen organic fruits and veggies. The price goes down significantly, and actually you maintain a lot more nutrients with frozen than you do with fresh many times, because it's coming from far away, and so it's sitting around losing nutrients. They start to break down. So yeah, you're getting a fresh piece of produce, but if you bought the frozen one, it's frozen instantly when it's at peak freshness. So just keep that in mind. Frozen can be really very good. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming. And if you have a more personal question you'd like to speak to me about, I'll be here if you have any time for comments. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.